Hi Year 11 and welcome to your night before news for paper 3, which is Weimar and Nazi Germany. First things first, you have a slide in front of you with some questions on it. I would like you to answer as many questions as you can in 5 minutes. So pause the video and have a go. So just check your answers and fill in any missing gaps. The missing gaps will be your priority for this evening. So make sure that you revise those topics using the information sheet that is on Arbor, and it's called Weimar and Nazi Germany Revision. So Year 11, the topics that are going to come up in the exam are challenges to the Weimar government from 1919 to 1923, reasons why Hitler and the Nazi Party gained support from 1929 to 1932, and the Munich Putsch. Now you should have already started revising these topics. If you have any questions about the content, make a list of them and make sure that you see your class teacher or another member of the history team on Monday before the exam, and we'll be happy to answer them. So pause the video and allow yourself sort of 5, maybe 10 minutes to make a list of questions that you have that you would like a member of the history team to answer for you on Monday. Your paper will be split into 2 sections, section A and section B. The first question that you will see in section A is the give 2 things you can infer from source A about. So it's an inference question. It's worth 4 marks. You'll spend 5 minutes on it. So I want you to pause the video and write down what is the first thing that you will do when you come across an inference question. The first thing that you will do is to highlight the focus of the question. So in the example you can see on the screen, it's give 2 things you can infer from source A about the treatment of Jews during the Kristallnacht. So you would highlight the treatment of Jews during the Kristallnacht. You will then highlight 2 clues in the source that tell you something about the topic in the question. So that could be a whole sentence that you highlight, it could be 2 or 3 words that you highlight, but you're looking for 2 clues about the topic in the question. You will then add your details to your booklet first. So you'll put your quotes in the section of the booklet that says details in the source that tell me this. Then what? So pause the video. What would you do next when you've added your details? Question 2 is an explain why question. It's worth 12 marks. You'll be spending about 15 minutes on this question. So if you had the question, explain why the Weimar government faced challenges 1919 to 1923, I'd like you to name 3 points that you could use to answer this question. So 3 factors. So pause the video and write down 3 factors that you think you could use to help you answer this question. So relevant factors would be the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, because the German reaction to that caused challenges for the Weimar government because the Weimar government was blamed. You could also have political uprisings, so threats from the left and the right. So that's the Spartacist uprising from the left and the Kapp Putsch from the right. And those are challenges because they threaten the stability of the government and the power of the government. They make the Weimar government look weak. And the final challenge that you could have is the French and Belgian invasion of the Ruhr, which then led the government to print more money, which led to hyperinflation. And again, that challenges the government because it makes the government look weak, and Germany is quite unstable at that point. So let's try this one then. Explain why the Nazi Party gained support from 1929 to 1932. So again, can you name 3 points or factors that you could use to answer this question? So pause the video, allow yourself some time and make a list of those 3 factors. So for this question, you might have Hitler as an individual allowed the Nazi Party to gain support because he was popular and charismatic and he made very effective speeches. You might have the use of the SA, so the paramilitary group or part of the Nazi Party that were organised and allowed the party to seem strong and in control. You might also have the use of propaganda, so how Hitler and the Nazi Party were able to appeal to different groups in society and promise to fix their problems and make things better. So when we have an explain why question, it's really important that we go beyond describing what happened and we actually start to explain why that would lead to a particular outcome. So if you have a look at the answer on your screen, I want you to read it carefully and then I want you to pause the video and think about how we could turn the information on the screen into a paragraph that actually answers the question. So pause the video now and write down what would need to be added to this paragraph so that it answers the question. So hopefully Year 11 you'll have realised that there are two aspects that were missing. First of all is a clear point. So you need to rearrange the words of the question into the answer. So in this case, one reason why the Nazi Party gained support was the role of Hitler, for example, and then we introduce the evidence, which is exactly what we had on the original answer. The other bit that's missing is the explanation, and there's a useful phrase that you can use when you're explaining, and that's "this meant that." So in this case, this meant that people trusted him and were more likely to give the Nazi Party their support by voting for them. So again, we've used the words of the question in our explanation. We then come to section B. Now for section B, you'll have a sources and interpretations booklet that you'll have to refer to. The first question in section B asks you why a source might be useful. So let's have a look at the response to a utility question and a usefulness question on the screen in front of you. I'd like you to read the answer, which would score 1 mark out of 8. And I would like you to write down what the answer misses. So what is not in this answer? So why can it get no more than 1 out of 8? So pause the video now and have a go at writing down what you think might be missing. What that answer missed was any contextual knowledge. It's so important, Year 11, that you add contextual knowledge, which means knowledge about the topic, into your answer for this style of question. If you don't do that, you are capped at 1 mark out of 8. You can't get any higher. So if we have a look at the new and improved answer on your screen, you'll see the section in green is the context. So that's the knowledge that you're going to write down that's not in the source already. So really it's your chance to show off a little bit, you know your history. Now the answer on the screen would gain 4 marks out of 8 because I've only looked at one source. So to get 8 out of 8, you would evaluate both sources in the same way. So you've got a judgment, the person has used the content of the source, we've got the contextual knowledge, the additional knowledge in there as well. What you'll also notice in there is that there is an added section on provenance, which just explains why the provenance makes it more useful. So we haven't just got it was useful because it was written by somebody who was there at the time. We're then taking that further to say this means that the information that he gives is likely to be accurate. So it's really important that you make sure that if somebody is there at the time, you're not just saying that they're there at the time, but you're saying this is going to make the source therefore more accurate. We then have question 3b, which is worth 4 marks. You're going to spend about 5 minutes on it. Now for this question, you do not need any own knowledge. It's a comprehension question. So you are just quite simply looking at 2 different interpretations and identifying the difference between them. For this question, you need to learn the sentence structure. So interpretation 1 argues, and you summarise the view of that interpretation in your own words. It says, so make sure you pop that quote in. And then there's that keyword however, which means that you are comparing one interpretation with another. And then interpretation 2 argues, it says. So pause the video now and write out those sentence structures so that you memorise them. If you follow those sentence structures, you will get full marks. And then we have question 3c, which asks you why interpretations differ. And I want you to see if you can remember the magic sentence that you start this answer with. So pause the video and see if you can remember that sentence. Write it down, please. So hopefully you've remembered that. So the sentence you need to start this answer with is the interpretations differ because they have given weight to different sources. Or in other words, the interpretations differ because the historians have used different sources. If you write that sentence on its own without following it up, you would get 1 mark out of 4. But we want to make sure that our answers are really strong. So to make sure your answers are strong, you're going to follow the sentence structures that are on the screen in front of you. So again, pause the video, write them out, cover them, write them out again and see if you can memorise them. So now we come to section B, question 3D. Now this is the biggest question on the paper, so it's going to take you the longest amount of time. So can you remember how long you should spend on this question? So just pause the video and make a note of your answer now. So you're looking at spending approximately 30 minutes on this question, 15 minutes per section. So how many marks is it worth? Well, this is worth 16 marks and you have an opportunity to get 4 extra marks for spelling and grammar. So it's worth allowing 5 minutes at the end of this exam to go back through this question and just check your capital letters, your use of vocabulary and try and make it as wide-ranging as possible to pick up those extra 4 marks. So this question can feel a little bit overwhelming because it's worth 20. You don't have to use all of the lines in your booklet for this. In terms of grade 4, we're going to be aiming for around about 8 marks. So in your exam, you will be asked how far you agree with a particular interpretation. And in your exam, it's how far do you agree with interpretation 2. The first thing you need to do is make a judgment about that interpretation. And then you're going to write 1 paragraph about the interpretation that is mentioned in the question. So in this case, interpretation 2. Let's show you how to do that. So your opening statement can be incredibly simple. So quite simply, I agree with interpretation 2. If you're not sure, if you don't have an opinion once you've read them, then agree with the interpretation in the question because that's going to make your essay writing more straightforward. So in this case, I agree with interpretation 2. And then what we need to do, or what we need to see, I should say, in each paragraph is the following. We need to see a summary of the view in the interpretation. We need to see a quote from the interpretation. You need to support that quote with specific knowledge and you need to link back to the question. Now at this moment, I would like you to pause the video and I would like you to find the summary of the view in that paragraph and write it down. I'd like you to find the quote from the interpretation and I'd like you to write it down. I would like you to find the specific knowledge that's used to support the quote and write it down. And can you find the link back to the question? So pause the video and see if you can find those 4 parts. Now you can check your answers by looking at the screen. So you'll see a judgment, a summary of the view, a quote, a support, a link back to the question, and then that process is repeated. So we've got another summary, quote, support, and link. Now, just like any how far do you agree question, you have to show more than one side. You have to show both sides of the argument. So in this case, what you need to do is challenge the argument that you found in interpretation 2 using interpretation 1. So we're going to start that by writing the view in interpretation 2 can be challenged using interpretation 1. So memorise that sentence because that is what is going to help you to bring in another point of view. And then you go through the process again. So, but this time for interpretation 1. So we're going to have a summary of the view, a quote. We're going to support that quote with specific knowledge and we're going to link back to the question. So again, find those points, find those aspects in this paragraph. So pause the video now and see if you can find them. And there we go, we can see that it's colour coded on your screen again. So we've got summary, quote, support, and we've repeated that again. Summary, quote, support, and the link is in the last sentence. The government was weak. And then finally, and really importantly, year 11, you need to go and make a judgment. So if you have agreed that interpretation 2 is convincing, then you're going to put that into your conclusion. So overall, I do find interpretation 2 convincing because. You might decide that you don't. So overall, I do not find interpretation 2 convincing because. but it is important that you have that overall argument. So good luck. Make a note of any questions that you've got, whether that's about content or exam technique, and please don't hesitate to find one of us either in the morning or at lunchtime or in your lesson. Well done.